Hi, my name is Slobodanka Dimova, and I'm from the University of Copenhagen. Today I'll talk about bottom-up implementation of CEFR in Denmark. Let me first tell you a little bit about the context. Denmark is a Nordic country that lags behind other European countries in adoption and adaptation of CEFR. And even though the educational system is very similar to that of Sweden, Norway, Finland, other Nordic countries, the situation with CEFR is very different. The CEFR lags behind other European countries because of the fear that it would affect the traditions in teaching and learning foreign languages in Denmark. There was also fear that different instructional and learning identities across the foreign language subjects will be affected. At this point, the different foreign languages are governed by different teaching and learning philosophies. It was also seen as a threat to teacher autonomy. At this point, even though we have a national curriculum, teachers have a lot of autonomy in the way they operationalize the curriculum at local level and how they develop their teaching and learning materials. There was also fear that the focus on learning as a flexible process, that is the focus on learning as a cyclical process where learners acquire language at a different pace, would be lost with CEFR. So therefore, in the foreign language curricula in Denmark at this point, CEFR is mentioned as an inspiration for the establishment of curricular goals. There are no explicit references to CEFR descriptors, and direct alignment between curricular goals and CEFR descriptors is only found in English curriculum for upper secondary education. And here's an example of the text in the curriculum for French in obligatory education. As you can see, there's a description of CEFR. Most importantly is this underlined text here at the bottom, where CEFR is presented as providing descriptions of proficiency levels across languages, that it helps measure language learning progress. It builds a bridge between elementary and secondary education. It offers inspiration for language teachers. And most importantly, it's not a binding document. So even though there may be an orientation to finish obligatory education at a A2 level in CEFR, this is not a binding document. And given that CEFR is mentioned like this in the foreign language curricula, when we tried to see what teachers knew about it, how familiar they were with CEFR, we found that they don't know much. Only about 21% of about 650 teachers that were surveyed, only about 21% knew CEFR and its uses, while most of the teachers did not know anything. In another study where English teachers were asked about their familiarity with CEFR, one said that they had not heard about it before. Some said that they didn't have time to familiarize with CEFR because they're pressed for time and they cannot use it for anything, while some said that they work with CEFR indirectly because because the current curriculum or common goals for English it builds on CEFR. So the expected role of CEFR in Denmark is to compare curricula and instructional goals across foreign languages, streamline instruction across educational levels, or build a bridge between educational levels, follow language learning progress over time, and align with other countries. The question that arises, though, is how to implement CEFR and maintain the local education philosophy and culture. And we tried to do that with a bottom-up implementation of CEFR. Currently, most countries and most institutions use the top-down implementation of CEFR. And you'll hear more about this in Barry Sullivan's presentation on the comprehensive learning system, which is a really good implementation model to consider if CEFR is central to the educational reform. So here CEFR is adopted, and then the curriculum is revised according to CEFR, then teaching plans and learning materials are designed, and then assessment is developed in alignment with the curriculum and the delivery of the curriculum. And then there's teacher training implemented. As I said earlier, because of all the fears and perceived threats of CFR to the education system in Denmark, this top-down implementation was not possible. So what happens now is that CFR was recommended by the ministry, as you could see in the national curriculum, and that happened only recently. At this point, we're working on teacher familiarization and CFR operationalization. What this means is that teachers get familiarized with the CFR and the underlying theoretical background, and then they try to relate CFR descriptors and levels to their current practices, both teaching and assessment practices in the classroom. Most importantly, they are trained in terms of how to use CFR descriptors to provide feedback to students, but also to allow students to self-evaluate and track down their process. And based on this, teacher and learning materials are designed, and the assessment that is being designed would become more apparently associated with the different CFR levels, which would naturally lead to an obvious alignment of the curriculum with CFR. Right now, we are at the beginning of this process, and we hope that we'll be able to reach the end point of the process. But the thing is that the bottom-up process is unsystematic, non-linear and long, compared to the top-down process, which starts from the top and then it spreads systematically to, hopefully systematically to the lower levels. Here we start with teachers who are motivated and interested, the burning souls, if you will, and then we try to spread it to other teachers as they start hearing about this process. It's much longer than the top-down process as well, because it follows the natural trajectory of the spreading interest. It is based on a micro-level approach. We start with instead of localizing the CFR standards, we start with local practices and local standards, and then we try to get a broader application of CFR. We start with a familiar ground, which means we use familiar ground as a starting point. We start with current practices the teachers have as a starting point. We start, because they know what they do and they've done it for years, and we try to introduce CFR in relation to what they're doing, which allows us to keep teachers' agency to remain central, because they're the ones that are used as experts in what is being done currently in Denmark. And this approach helps us develop teacher cognition of CFR, because they're thinking about the underlying theoretical underpinnings and how they are operationalized in everyday life, but also enhances teacher assessment literacy, because they can relate CFR both to their current teaching practices, but also to their ongoing continuous assessment practices, and then understanding national assessment practices. I'll stop here. Here are the references. Thank you very much for listening.